Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome. I'm Ann Radway, the Associate Director in the Division of Regulatory Project Management in CTP's Office of Science. I've worked with CTP in the Office of Science for the last 9 years. I started as a Regulatory Health Project Manager and moved up through many leadership positions into my current role. As Associate Director, among many other things, I'm responsible for the training and development of the division. One of the main priorities is to prepare the regulatory health project managers to serve as industry liaisons and the regulatory experts in the Office of Science. Prior to joining CTP, I spent several years in the military and as a contractor working with biological select agents. I started my current role as Associate Director in the Division of Regulatory Project Management in October 2019. We are really excited to welcome everyone to the public meeting as we share the latest updates on DEEM product review. During today's meeting, we'll cover a range of topics related to DEEM product review, including an overview of the CTP OS planning and preparation for the September 9th deadline. We will highlight our current review progress and current metrics and reporting, and also provide information on the public list of products. After the presentation, we will also have time to answer your questions during an open panel discussion with you and representatives from the Office of Science. I encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the meeting by entering your name and your question in the chat box below and then pressing post. You will not see a confirmation, but after pressing post, your question will be successfully submitted to us. Feel free to submit multiple questions as well. Please be aware that we will not take questions that are not related to the topic of this meeting or any questions about individual applications. If you have questions about your specific applications, please reach out directly to your assigned regulatory health project manager or email askctp@fda.hhs.gov. Now, I'd like to start the meeting by introducing Dr. Matthew Holman, the Director of the Office of Science at the Center for Tobacco Products. Dr. Holman has 20 years of experience working as a regulator at FDA, including over 10 years at CTP. During his first 6 years at CTP, he headed the Division of Product Science. In this position, he oversaw evaluation of the composition and design of tobacco products. In addition, he was involved in chemical, microbiological, and engineering research on tobacco products, resulting in numerous publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals. He was appointed to his current position as Director of the Office of Science in January 2017. In addition to reviewing tobacco product applications, the Office of Science provides scientific support for regulations and guidance, evaluates the knowledge bases for regulatory decisions, and carries out research to fill the gaps in scientific knowledge related to tobacco product regulation. Many thanks to Dr. Holman for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Matt to share more information on DEEM product review.
Great, thanks for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. I want to start off by thanking all of you for attending and participating in this meeting by submitting the many questions that have already been submitted, and I'm sure additional ones that will be submitted throughout the meeting. I am the Director of Office of Science, as Ann indicated. I do want to note that throughout the meeting, you will hear me and my colleagues refer to the Office of Science as OS, so I wanted to go ahead and let you know about that abbreviation we'll be using, and as we use other abbreviations or acronyms, we'll be sure to define what they mean as we're going through. But for those of you who are not aware, the Office of Science has primary responsibility within the Center for Tobacco Products for reviewing marketing applications for new tobacco products. During this meeting, we will review OS's planning and preparation for the September 9th, 2020 deadline. We'll also talk about or highlight the current review progress and current metrics of reporting of our progress. And then we'll have an open panel discussion with you, the audience, and representatives from the Office of Science. CTP's director, Mitch Zeller, previously pledged that the agency would keep stakeholders up to date on the agency's progress throughout this bullish year. We're now at that point in the review of these applications where we can share some updates on our progress. Our aim is that this meeting increases your understanding of the preparation and planning that we did prior to September 9th to streamline the intake and review process. But I also want to provide some updates on the review status of timely applications by sharing the latest metrics and reporting. And then during the last part of the meeting, as I said, we'll have a panel of leaders from within OS who will address the questions and potential concerns that we received from meeting attendees. We received many questions ahead of the meeting, which we'll try to answer, but we also will address questions that are received during the meeting. So please remember to submit your questions at any time during the meeting, as Anne described at the outset. Let's begin with some brief background on the review process and how we got here. There are three pathways available to bring a new tobacco product onto the market in the United States. They are the pre-market tobacco product application pathway, which you'll hear us talk about or refer to as PMTAs throughout this meeting. The second way to bring a product to market, a new tobacco product to market, are substantial equivalence reports, or what we call SE reports. And then the third is our requests for exemption from substantial equivalence, which we shorthand as exemption requests. The SE pathway continues to be the most commonly used pathway of the three for applications for cigarettes, smokeless tobacco products, cigars, hookah tobacco products, pipes, and roll your own tobacco products. In contrast, all applications that we receive for e-cigarette devices as well as e-liquids were submitted through the PMTA pathway. We did also receive a small percentage of PMTAs for other product categories in addition to the e-cigarette devices and e-liquids. For PMTAs, we determined whether marketing a tobacco product meets four main criteria. First, we consider whether the product is appropriate for the protection of public health. And this is determined with respect to the risks and benefits to the population as a whole, which includes users and non-users. This consideration also takes into account whether there's an increase or decreased likelihood that existing users of tobacco products will stop using the new tobacco product, as well as the increased or decreased likelihood that those who do not use any tobacco products will start using the new tobacco products. Additionally, the other three criteria that we evaluate for each PMTA are whether the manufacturing of the product conforms with requirements in Section 906E of the FD&C Act, or the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, whether the proposed labeling would be false and misleading, which could cause the product to be misbranded under Section 903. And the last criteria is whether the product conforms to any product standards under Section 907, that are applicable to that given new tobacco product. Lastly, in terms of background, let me remind everyone of how we got here. In the summer of 2019, the courts ruled or ordered that marketing applications for e-cigarettes, pipes, hookah, and certain cigars on the market had to be submitted to FDA, more specifically to CTP, by September 9th of last year. That court order allowed products for which applications were submitted by September 9th deadline to remain on the market under enforcement discretion for up to a year while pending FDA review. This undertaking represents a major milestone for tobacco product regulation and for public health as a whole. By implementing the pre-market review requirements for all deemed new tobacco products, we are taking steps to transform the marketplace from one where all tobacco towards one where all new tobacco products available for sale will have undergone a careful science-based review and oversight by the agency. A couple more points that I want to make. One, as a result of the court decision, we will not be, as a result of a different court decision, that is, we will not be enforcing this requirement for premium cigars. It's also important to note that any tobacco products, including deemed tobacco products, on the market in the United States as of February 15, 2007, are considered grandfathered, and they are not required to meet the to have a marketing authorization from FDA to be sold in the United States. Our preparation ahead of the September 2020 deadline has allowed us to be much more agile, efficient, and effective. Across the entire Center for, we've worked towards a system of continuous process improvement. And for the last several years, we have been preparing for the receipt and pre-market review of what we knew would be a large number of deemed new tobacco products. These efforts include improving our information technology systems, engaging with stakeholders, significantly increasing our hiring, as well as streamlining our review procedures themselves, among other things. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to walk through and give you some more details about that planning and preparation over the next few slides here. Since 2011, the Office of Science has increased tenfold. In just 10 years, we've gone from about 40 staff members in OS to over 500 full-time staff members today. The majority of these staff are scientific or regulatory experts who spend most of their time on application review. And we aren't done yet. We continue to hire and to train even more staff to conduct application review, increase our review capacity, strengthen our reviews, as well as increase our efficiency during the review process. Ahead of the September 9th, 2020 deadline, we used a multifaceted approach to provide resources and information to applicants. This slide and the next few slides show examples of such approaches. I just want to point out a few things on this slide. First, we issued a final guidance with a detailed description of information and data that we recommended be included in PMTAs for e-cigarette devices and e-liquids. The second point is that all the materials from the October 2019 meeting, including transcripts, video recordings, the presentations decks themselves, all those things continue to be available on the FDA website. And I would say that the guidance document, as well as the meeting materials from the October 2019, are still valuable resources that I would encourage applicants to utilize as appropriate when responding to deficiency letters from OS or when assembling new marketing applications to be submitted to CTP. Again, here are more examples of approaches that we use to reach stakeholders ahead of the September 2020 deadline. I do think it's worth talking about the electronic submissions. We recognize that in the past, some applicants chose not to submit applications electronically, or if they did choose to submit electronically, they had some difficulties doing that. Therefore, we put a lot of effort into helping applicants understand how to submit marketing applications electronically. I think one of the most significant aids that we provided to facilitate submission of marketing applications was that we allowed applicants to group submissions. So many applications could be included in a single submission from a given applicant. For example, let's say a cigar manufacturer in the past would have submitted separate essay reports for each of its, say, 75 new cigars. But instead, to meet the September 2020 deadline, that cigar manufacturer actually would have sent in just a single submission through the portal. And that submission would have contained the essay reports for all 75 new cigars. And to help facilitate the grouping of multiple applications into a single submission, we also provided an example of a spreadsheet that could be used by applicants to organize their submission and clearly identify the applications and products in each submission. I'm very happy to report today that a lot of manufacturers did, in fact, submit electronically. A lot of manufacturers or applicants did choose to submit their applications as group submissions, and they did use either the spreadsheet example that we provided or a similar spreadsheet to help organize their group submissions. And as a result, we were, and I really want people to really stop and think about this, as a result of all that preparation and support that we provided applicants, we were successful in receiving over 6.5 million marketing applications within a window of just a few weeks. Also, as a result, we were able to process that huge number of voluminous submissions to identify all the products and marketing applications that we received by the September 9th, 2020 deadline. Lastly, we have 25 reviewer guides and memos on a variety of review topics covering numerous scientific disciplines and topic areas. These documents have a lot of useful information for applicants, so if you haven't looked at them, please take the time to look at them for, again, responding to your deficiency letters or even assembling new applications. One of the other actions that we took ahead of the September 9th or September 2020 deadline was to provide more information to stakeholders on TPMFs, or tobacco product master files. We gave a lot of time and attention to explaining how TPMFs could be useful to the applicants themselves, to, say, third parties, and then to FDA in our review of the information. TPMFs were introduced in part to decrease the burden on applicants because a single TPMF can be used multiple times. In other words, that TPMF can be submitted once with information, and we can look at that over and over again for different, say, PMTAs, as reports or exemption requests, which makes it much easier on the applicant or submitter. It also makes it less resource intensive for us. And I'm happy to report, as a result of the education that we did around TPMFs, we saw a tenfold increase in TPMFs received by CTP when you compare what we received at the time of the bolus compared to what we had seen up until that point in time. So currently we have about 100 TPMFs that we've received. They generally are really four types of, or the TPMF owners at least fall into four categories. Almost half of the TPMFs we got were from suppliers to actually the finished product manufacturer, so that those account for almost 50%. Another third, or a little bit more than a third, came from manufacturers of the tobacco products. So some manufacturers, for example, might have different groups within their company that have certain information. So those different parts of the company may have submitted information in TPMF that then could be relied on for the overall application review. Almost about 10% of the TPMFs we got were from testing labs. So typically these are analytical methodologies used to do product analysis or different types of studies. And then lastly, we got a small number of TPMFs from consultants that were just providing information on behalf of a finished product manufacturer. I did talk about group submissions just a few moments ago and how they've been really helpful, I think, to both applicants and to CTP. And I do want to talk, though, about a related IT tool that we developed, which is a new cloud-based product data service that houses the submission product data. So each application, as I said, many of that applications were grouped in submissions. Each submission contains multiple applications. Each application is for an individual or single product. So this new service houses that product information for each and every one of those products in the 6.5 million plus marketing applications that we got by the September 2020 deadline. With the large number of products that we expect to receive from applications for, we knew it was going to be important to improve our IT systems, and data from this new IT tool is being used to generate the list of submissions and products received from industry. It's also being used to help us efficiently determine what products are in a particular review. And then lastly, really useful in helping us report out on those products that are under review. So population of this new database was significantly, or I want to point out really that population of this new database was significantly facilitated by submission of the spreadsheet that I talked about a minute ago, either the one that we provide as an example to help applicants organize their submissions and provide information on each individual product, or as I said, a similar, if they used a similar spreadsheet, really help facilitate population of this new product data service that we have created. Now that I've highlighted the planning and preparation that we did ahead of the September 9th, 2020 deadline, I want to discuss how we created a fair process to review applications and really what's working well. As part of this section of the talk, I'll also describe how we're allocating our review resources. As anticipated, we received thousands of tobacco products submissions covering millions of tobacco products, and the vast majority of which came in very close to the September 9th, 2020 deadline. The submissions, as you might imagine, vary substantially in number of tobacco products contained in each submission, the size of each submission, the format and organization of each submission. However, despite these challenges and really significant challenges, due to our preparation and in continued engagement with stakeholders, the intake of this large number of submissions went very smoothly. Part of the reason for the success, I think, is due to applicants using the group submissions, using the TPMFs, and then using the product spreadsheet provided by FDA or similar spreadsheet. We've completed the work to go through the submissions and identify all of the products contained within them, which has allowed us to create the product lists that we recently released, as well as helping us move the applications through our review process. I'm sure you all can appreciate that this was not an easy task, and I just want to say I'm very proud of my colleagues for the work they've done, which have enabled this to happen. And as a result of that work, acceptance, filing, and substantive scientific review of applications are moving forward with no major issues from this intake process. Processing of the pre-market applications has historically been conducted, I think most of you guys know, on a first in, first out, or what we call FIFO basis. This really means that when an application is received, it immediately enters phase one, or what we call acceptance review, and then moves through the review phases to a final action. This process has worked very well when processing and review capacity. Each phase of the review process is one-to-one. In other words, it works really well when our capacity at all three phases of review of an application are adequate so that we don't see delays at each phase. However, due to the September 9th deadline and anticipated increase in applications that we had expected, as well as the volume of, the size, I guess I should say, of each application's, or each submission being so large, we expected that if we followed this FIFO process for defining review order, it would result in significant delays at all the phases of the review process for all three pathways, for PMTAs, exemption requests, and essay reports. Therefore, to address this issue, CTP developed a triage process that we think is very fair and ensures that the greatest possible public health impact results from our review of these applications. Okay, to determine which SC reports and exemption requests would enter review and in which order, we simply randomized all applications by manufacturer and then by product type. meaning we took all of the ESSA reports and randomized by manufacturer and product type. For example, if manufacturer X submitted ESSA reports for cigarettes and cigars, the cigarette ESSA reports got one place in the randomization, and the cigar ESSA reports got a different place in the randomization. We did this again for both SE reports and exemption requests, but I do want to just point out or be clear that the SE reports and exemption requests were randomized separately, so that there is a separate queue for SE reports and a different queue for exemption requests. They weren't all combined. It's just that we followed the same process for both of those pathways. And most of the PMTAs that we received were in fact randomized using the process that I just described for SE reports and exemptions. However, we did use a triage approach for PMTAs that included a separate queue for those PMTAs from current manufacturers with the largest market share of ENDS products, and use that as a primary criterion to determine the order of tobacco product review. The reason is we wanted to ensure that we reviewed these PMTAs is that regardless of our conclusion, whether we issue a positive order or a negative order, those actions on these products will have a significant impact based on the high level of use of these products currently by end users. I do want to make an important point about the product types you include in the triage and therefore undergoing review. All types of products are included, whether the products are statutory, meaning cigarettes, smokeless tobacco products, or your own tobacco products, or whether the products are covered by the deeming regulations, so ENDS, cigar, pipe, and water pipe. So for example, SE reports for cigarettes and cigars are included in our triage and are being reviewed. Another important, and being treated the same, they're not being treated differently in that triage process I just described in the previous slide. Another important point that I want to make is that we completed 2 rounds of triage for PMTAs. For the first round, we took all the applications received between April and August of last year, and we applied that triage process. By doing this, we were able to know the review order and begin review at the very beginning of September. For the second round, we took all the applications received by September 9th and applied the triage process. Therefore, PMTAs that received by August of last year had 2 chances to be pulled into scientific review. For example, manufacturer A submitted PMTAs, say last July. Their applications would have had a chance to be prioritized for scientific review in early August, and then a second opportunity to be prioritized for scientific review later in the year last year. In contrast, for example, if manufacturer B submitted PMTAs, let's say on September 6th of last year, their applications would have had a chance to be prioritized for scientific review in late fall of last year, but they would have not had an opportunity to enter scientific review at the very beginning of September. Despite all the great progress that I've described having been made on intake and review thus far, we know that we will not be able to review all of the submitted applications by September 9th of this year, really due to a number of factors. The large size the large number of applications that we're currently moving into review all at the same time, the uniqueness or novelty of deemed products and considered policy and scientific issues to be considered. Realistically, the finite nature of FDA review resources, and I think also importantly, the necessary time to make sure that we are consistent in our review process and continue to apply the appropriate level of rigor to that process. So with that being said, I'd like to go into some more detail on our review process and share some of the latest stats on the large number of applications that have made it through the different phases of review. We completed the intake and processing step for all pre-market tobacco applications submitted by the September 9th deadline. Again, we completed intake of all of these at this point in time. You can see on the slide the number of different SE reports, exemption requests, and PMTAs that received. I think you'll all quickly recognize that this number of applications exceeds anything that we've ever seen by orders of magnitude. This was very challenging due to the size, complexity, and diversity of these submissions. For example, some applicants provided separate submissions for each section of the marketing application, such as submitting the clinical data separately from the product identification and manufacturing data, while others included up to many thousands of products within a single submission. In fact, one firm actually submitted information on more than 4 million tobacco products in a single submission. The amount of content in each of these submissions also varied greatly, with some applications including up to 2 million files, where each file contains multiple pages of content for FDA to review. So the ability to process all these applications and identify the products subject to each application is really a huge accomplishment. And as I said earlier, I'm really very proud of my colleagues for getting us to this point. That being said, there's more to be done. And on this slide here, I think a lot of you guys have seen this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the chevron diagram here shows all the phases of application review for all three pathways. I will just point out really quickly that the time needed for each step in this, or each phase of the review, is not reflected by in this chevron diagram. Also want to point out that the filing review in phase 2 only applies to PMTAs. There is no filing review for SE reports or exemption requests. And similarly, phase 4, the post-market reporting only applies to PMTAs as well. If a product is found appropriate for protection of public health, which you'll hear us sometimes refer to as APPH, then the order letter will identify post-market reporting requirements. I'm going to kind of quickly walk through the different phases of the review to describe them, and then also, I think more importantly, to share our progress at each phase. I'll limit my discussion to really just phases 1 through 3. In phase 1, to start, OS completes an acceptance review to ensure that the products fall under our jurisdiction. If in fact a product in an application falls under CTP's jurisdiction, OS completes a high-level preliminary review to determine if the application on its face contains basic statutory and regular requirements in accordance with our refuse to accept, or what we call RTA regulations. The RTA regulations apply to all the pathways, PMTAs, SE reports, and exemption requests. We may RTA applications if any of the 10 criteria listed in the RTA regulations apply to a given application. You'll see common deficiencies on the slide that have led to RTAs in all three pathways. I'm not going to read them, but I did want to share some examples just to help you understand what might lead to, or what has led to, an RTA. But I do think it's worth taking a minute here just to delve into what full identification of a tobacco product means, so that you can understand why we would RTA for lack of product identification. The product properties that are required and considered for full identification of a tobacco product are listed here on the slide. Failure to include any of these product properties would lead to an RTA. When receiving marketing applications for tobacco products, we need to identify the individual product that is subject of each application, and the pieces of information that uniquely identify a tobacco product are referred to as properties. For example, the product name is a property that helps us identify each tobacco product. However, I think you all recognize that the product name alone would not be sufficient to uniquely identify each tobacco product. In order to determine the properties needed to uniquely identify each tobacco product, it's necessary to determine which properties are actually applicable to a given product. So as each each product type has a different set of properties that would be needed to uniquely identify that tobacco product. For example, I should say to that point, by knowing the type of product the product category, in other words, of a given product, FDA inherently knows some of the properties associated with that product. However, additional identifying properties are needed in order to distinguish an individual product within a given category or subcategory from other products within that same category or subcategory. And this determination of these properties, identifying properties, is really dictated by the product category and subcategory. It should be noted that the properties needed to uniquely identify tobacco products are determined by FDA based on our experience in reviewing regulatory submissions for these products to date. We have developed memos over the years that are periodically updated and posted on our website. FDA recently updated our unique ID memo. And I do want to point out that new or updated unique identification properties will be captured in Appendix A of our letters to applicants starting very soon. So it'll actually be directly included in the letters and as an appendix. OS's latest unique ID memo includes a particular item of interest that I want to point out. I really just want to highlight that that we've identified a new product category, what we're calling heated tobacco products, or HTPs, that are captured in our newest memo. And HTPs are further divided into specific subcategories such as closed or open HTPs. On this slide, I've included one example of a unique ID for a closed HTP. I'm not going to go through all of the properties line by line, but I will point out that the properties can be the same or very similar to those of vapes or e-cigarettes. Really, the primary difference between HTPs and vapes is that HTPs can use multiple types of consumables, while vapes or e-cigarettes cannot be used with solid tobacco. Now that I've talked through the substance of acceptance reviews, I want to provide you an update on the status of acceptance reviews across all three pathways. As of April 11th of this year, a couple months ago, we have accepted over 320,000 total applications across the three pathways, resulting in issuing more than 55,000 RTAs. To say it differently, as of April 1st, we had completed acceptance review of over 375,000 PMTAs, ESSA reports, and exemption requests. We do continue to conduct acceptance reviews of applications received by the September 9th, 2020 deadline for all three pathways, and we are providing updates on the progress on our tobacco products applications metric and reporting webpage. But I do want to share a number of important factors and context that I think need to be considered when you review the metric data on our website. What we found is, due to the large volume of applications received by the September 9th deadline and the real-time changes to the status taking place, as applications move through, our groups of applications move through the review process, we're seeing constant changes in the month-to-month data over time. Although the data may be accurate at a given point in time when it's shared publicly, there are corrections and adjustments that often need to be made. In some cases, they need to be made retroactively. For example, an action taken on a set of applications toward the end of a reporting period may not be captured in our systems until the beginning of the next reporting system. So as the data for the next reporting system is being collected, we would go back and look at the data that we previously reported and update any of that data if, in fact, updates were needed to be made. And given that many of the submissions include very large numbers of applications, even updating the acceptance review metric, for example, for just a single submission could change the metric by tens of thousands of applications. For example, If the last reporting period, say right ahead of the April 1st deadline that we last reported, we had accepted a submission, but it didn't make it in the report. When we go back in our next update and provide that data, we would include that acceptance number. But again, if that submission was, say, 25,000 products, that is going to make a huge difference in our acceptance metrics. So just wanted to point that out. And in light of this, what we decided to do was stop reporting on a monthly basis, but really start reporting cumulative fiscal year to date data to share with stakeholders. I also do want to point out, again, because of these issues that I'm just talking about, that data is generally accurate within 10% is what we're finding. But again, it is truly a snapshot in time on the data that we have in hand. And because we are processing so many applications through all the various phases of review, these data can change in pretty large ways, and even as frequently as daily. But despite all these challenges that I'm talking through, we are providing the updates because we do think it's important to be as transparent as possible, while at the same time, trying to make sure that we're providing accurate and timely data around some of these metrics. Okay, I want to shift from phase 1 to discussing phase 2, which is the filing review. As I mentioned, we do filing reviews for PMTAs, but not for SE reports or exemption requests. The purpose of a filing review is to determine if the application contains sufficient information to initiate substantive scientific review. So during filing, we conduct a more in-depth multidisciplinary review of the PMTA to determine if all statutory and regular requirements have been provided as outlined in Section 910B, and specifically parts A through G of the FD&C Act. So at the end of the filing phase, one of two things happens. If we find that PMTA has all the information, basic information that is, that we would need just to kick off substantive scientific review, we would issue a filing letter to notify the applicant of such. If we find any information that we need in Section 910B is not present, then we would issue a refuse to file, or what we call RTF letter. That RTF letter will include the reason for, or it will identify the information that was not submitted that led to the RTF decision. Here are some common deficiencies that lead to RTFs. Again, I'm not going to read through this list, but I think you'll recognize as you read through this that there really is some basic information that we need in order to be able to conduct our substantive scientific review. And if we don't have that information, we won't file the PMTA. We won't move it into substantive scientific review. And I think, again, what's laid out here is really what's captured in statute under Section 910B of the FD&C Act. Okay, let me share the status of filing reviews for PMTAs. The date on the slide is, again, as of April 1st of this year. But as I said earlier, with acceptance reviews, we are updating our metrics on the website. The new data on the status of filing reviews should be posted soon on our website. That being said, as of April 1st, we had completed a total of nearly 45,000 PMTAs. We had completed filing reviews for nearly 45,000 PMTAs, with over 90% being filed. The number of filing reviews completed continues to increase significantly each month, as is the case for our acceptance reviews as well. If accepted and if filed by CTP, a PMTA moves into phase 3, which deals with the substantive scientific review and results in an action from CTP. For SE and exemption requests, they would just need to move through acceptance, and then if accepted, they would move into phase 3 of substantive scientific review. The substantive scientific review is a multidisciplinary review of the data submitted in the application to determine if, in fact, the data is sufficient to meet the requirements for marketing under the 3 different statutes, And really, we ultimately issue three types of letter. We issue a deficiency letter, which may also include environmental information requests. We'll issue a marketing granted order, or the third type of letter we'd issue is a marketing denial order letter. And generally, what we expect when an applicant submits, applications, that application contains all the information we need to determine that it would be appropriate to allow marketing of that product. However, we've recognized that additional information may, for some applications, be needed to continue a review of that application. So if FDA has questions or identifies additional information needed to render such a decision, we may choose to, or that's when we would may choose to issue a deficiency letter. The deficiency letters that we issue include a time frame by which the manufacturer will need to respond to us, and the applicant can submit an amendment in response to that deficiency letter within that time frame. But I do want to point out that from the date that we issue that deficiency letter until we receive that amendment, if we in fact receive one, the review of that application is suspended. We do not work on our review clock stops. If, for example, during that review, we identify, as I said earlier, the need for additional information around the environmental assessment that we would need to do to prepare either an environmental impact statement, or EIS, or finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, we would issue that environmental information request typically as part of the deficiency letter, because we do need to find scientifically that a product can be marketed after review and application, but we also have to make sure that we meet the requirements of the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, that require us to either complete an EIS or FONSI before we allow marketing of a product. And as I mentioned earlier, if we do issue a marketing granted letter order, I want to just point out for PMTAs, we would also identify in that marketing granted order any post-market requirements. So if there are any restrictions, for example, on sales or distribution, we would describe them in that marketing granted order. And then lastly, I'll just say with the marketing denial order, if we do issue that, we will identify what deficiencies led us to that conclusion. Okay, I do want to say one more thing about specifically just about PMTA deficiency letters. So what I'm talking about on this slide is really specific to the PMTA pathway. We recently inserted additional text into these deficiency letters for the intent of clarifying the purpose and really the intention of the deficiency letters. These deficiency letters are intended to notify the applicant where FDA needs additional information. And you'll see the new language shown on this slide clarifies that the letter is not intended necessarily to convey a list of concerns about the product, and I also want to point out that this new language also it makes it clear that a complete responding to or a complete response to deficiency letter does not in and of itself guarantee that the application will lead to or receive a positive marketing order. As a decision about whether marketing the new product is appropriate for the protection of public health, or APH, is made after FDA reviews all available information, including whatever information is provided in response to a deficiency letter. For example, a deficiency letter may seek additional information related to HPHC testing and validation of test methods. And although an applicant may provide that information to adequately respond to the deficiency, we still need to analyze the totality of information in that application to determine whether the information in total supports a marketing application. It takes a lot of work by FDA staff to move an application from receipt to completion of substantive scientific review, which, like I said, will end in either a positive or negative order. letter. But that being said, we have issued marketing orders under the SE and EX pathways. As of April 1st, we'd issued a total of nearly 300 order letters, both positive and negative, under these two pathways. We have not yet issued any marketing orders for PMTAs. However, we do expect to issue order letters, again, with some possibly being positive and some possibly being negative, by September 9th of this year. I also want to point out that we've issued many deficiency letters under all three pathways, and we have completed many thousands of scientific reviews for all three pathways at this point in time. Okay, I just want to say thanks to everyone for staying with me so long. I just needed a few more minutes and then we'll get to our panel discussion. In the last section of my presentation, I want to discuss the product list that we made public earlier this year. The SE and EX lists were originally posted in February, and they included over 2,000 products, including about 1,100 cigars, over 330 pipe products, and over 660 water pipe products. The PMTA list, which posted in May, includes over 6,000 products. We made these lists available to the public in an effort to be transparent and increase stakeholder knowledge of these products. But I do want to point out that we had to ensure that the development and posting of these lists was done in accordance with applicable laws. For example, FDA needed to contact each individual applicant to request the dates of initial marketing, as well as current marketing status of each product for which an application was submitted by the September 9th, 2020 deadline. So, as part of that, I want to note that we use this information to determine if the existence of the pending application could be disclosed to the public or not. And we have not independently verified the information provided by applicants about the current marketing status of their products. It's important to note also that these are not comprehensive lists. They are not intended to cover all currently marketed deemed new tobacco products that a firm might be manufacturing, distributing, or selling. For example, the lists do not include products from companies that did not provide their information in time to be included. It does not include products that are subject to a positive marketing order from FDA before, I should say, April 5th of this year. And they don't include products that were commercially marketed in the United States as of February 15th, 2007, i.e. grandfathered products, which have not been modified. The list also do not include products that are subject to negative actions from FDA before April 5th of this year, or products with a pending submission that were not submitted by the September 9, 2020 deadline. Furthermore, as manufacturers are not required to submit more than one application for products that may have different names and or labels if the products are physically identical, some products on the list may also be marketed under different names and or under different labels. Lastly, certain products on these lists may also be subject to warning letters notifying a manufacturer of an alleged violation of the FD&T Act or applicable regulations. To determine if a product has been subject to a warning letter alleging failure to comply with applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, you can visit our warning letters webpage to find that information. And now I will hand the meeting back over to Ann to begin our Q&A section of the meeting.
Matt, thank you for sharing the latest updates on deemed product review and for remaining with us for the rest of the meeting to answer questions. I just wanted to also give a reminder that the PowerPoint slides as well as the recording of this event will be posted to our website. FDA will notify all registered attendees when they are made available. And now I'd like to introduce the rest of our panelists from the Office of Science and open the meeting to address questions. As a reminder, like I said in the beginning, you may submit questions at any time by entering your name and your question in the chat box below and then pressing post. You will not see a confirmation, but after pressing post, your question will be successfully submitted to us. Feel free to submit multiple questions, and also as a reminder, we will not address questions that are not related to the topic of this meeting or about individual applications. Therefore, if you have a specific question about your product application, please reach out directly to your regulatory health project manager or email askctp@fda.hhs.gov. Our first panelist is Dr. Todd Cecil. He is the Deputy Director for Regulatory Management in the Office of Science. Dr. Cecil joined CTP as a chemistry review scientist in 2015 and progressed through managerial positions until he served as the Associate Director of the Division of Product Science. In this position, he oversaw the evaluation of the composition and design of tobacco products. In addition, he served on the leadership team, which was involved in chemical, microbiological, and engineering research on tobacco products, resulting in numerous publications and peer-reviewed scientific journals. In 2020, Dr. Cecil became a Deputy Director of CTP's Office of Science. The leadership team in the Office of Science share responsibilities for reviewing tobacco product applications. Dr. Cecil's particular focus is on substantial equivalence and exemption from SE requests. In addition, Dr. Cecil participates in aspects of pre-market tobacco application review, provides scientific support for regulations and guidance, evaluates the knowledge basis for regulatory decisions, and carries out research to fill gaps in the scientific knowledge related to tobacco product regulation. Before his tenure at CTP, Dr. Cecil worked for over 20 years at the United States Pharmacopeal Convention, USP, including 10 years as the Vice President of Standards Development. USP is a nonprofit standard-setting organization for the pharmaceutical industry. In this role, Dr. Cecil authored and contributed to hundreds of pharmaceutical standards and chapters with broad industry impact, including a revised standard for metal impurities in pharmaceuticals. In this role, Todd traveled extensively and presented at hundreds of national and international symposia and training sessions throughout the world. Next, we are joined by Ms. Crystal Allard, the Director of the Office of Science Division of Regulatory Science Informatics. Ms. Allard's team supports all IT activities in the Office of Science. They provide OS with systems to help automate mundane processes so they can focus on interesting, relevant information to make good research and review decisions. These systems include review process automation, research activity tracking, and data storage and analysis. Ms. Allard has worked at CTP since January 2019, and before CTP, she worked at FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, the Office of the Commissioner, and the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Crystal has been at FDA since 2008, and before that, she worked in industry preparing electronic submissions and standardized study data for submission to FDA. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Joanna Randazzo. She is the Acting Chief of the Science Policy Branch in the Office of Science. In her role, Dr. Randazzo is responsible for supervising science policy activities and staff to analyze the needs of the Office of Science. This includes drafting regulatory and policy proposals and developing plans to provide consistency in the regulatory and scientific approaches to addressing public health concerns in the context of pre-market review and in the implementation of the Tobacco Control Act. Dr. Randazzo has been in the Office of Science at CTP for the last 8 years, originally serving as a regulatory health project manager prior to transitioning to policy work in 2014. Prior to joining CTP, Joanna was in private practice as a chiropractor and also worked as a personal trainer. We are also joined by Ms. Christy Stark. She is the Director of the Office of Science Division of Regulatory Project Management. Ms. Stark has over 18 years of regulatory experience at FDA, including over 10 years at CTP. Within her time at CTP, she has served in project management, DFO, and policy roles. In these positions, she has aided with the proposal, development, and implementation of rules, guidance, policies, and procedures around the handling and review of submissions. In her current role, she is responsible for the oversight of regulatory processes and review procedures associated with submissions handled within the Office of Science. Prior to working at CTP, Christy worked at FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research and Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And before that, she worked as a biologist for the National Cancer Institute. Thank you to all our panel members for joining us today. Now let's get started with our first question. Okay, here's our first question. Will FDA grant extensions to timely submitted applications that have passed acceptance and filing milestones and have proceeded to scientific review if FDA has not yet completed review by September 9th, 2021? Christy, I'm going to give this question to you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So in short, we're planning and striving to review as many applications as possible during this one-year period described in the court order that set that September 9th, 2020 application deadline. In addition, FDA does have the discretion to defer enforcement action against a particular product on a case-by-case basis as that one-year period for review comes to an end in September 2021. But I'm noting it's case-by-case specific to that particular product and circumstance.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, next question. When metrics are reported, does a single number represent a single SKU or an application that may be bundled into multiple SKUs? I'm going to give that to Crystal.
Hello. The numbers that are listed on the metrics and reporting webpage called Tobacco Product Applications, Metrics and Reporting report the number of products, but it's important to note that one product listed on that page may represent multiple products on the market. So for instance, an example is that we may have received an application for a single product called Alpha e-cigarette, but it can also be sold as beta e-cigarette or gamma e-cigarette. And the manufacturers only submitted one application in this example for one single physical product, which is identical, but is marketed under 3 different product names. It's also important to note that the products that are listed on the webpage are counted differently from the way that they're registered and listed. And I know that the registration and listing uses the SKUs, sometimes we call them SKUs. But we don't use those SKUs when we're doing our product review. So that's a slightly different counting method.
If possible, I'd like to add one point regarding registration and listing versus the product counts. Registration and listing is purely for domestic products. With the requirements, we still require regulation to include foreign. Our product counts include both foreign and domestic manufacturers for the products.
Thank you both. Our next question is the FDA prioritizing review by market share? For example, is FDA prioritizing reviewing PMTA applications for the products that dominate the market? Todd, can you take this one?
Todd, we can't hear you.
Maybe.
All right.
Oh, there you go. We can hear you now.
Too many mute buttons. I'm sorry. So due to the large number of ENDS products currently marketed and for which we anticipated receiving submissions, FDA decided to dedicate a portion of its resources to reviewing the products that account for the most of the current market. The continued marketing of these products has the potential to have the greatest public health impact, either positively or negatively, as they hold the largest overall market share and therefore likely used by the largest number of people. For this reason, FDA pulled several applications into a separate review queue and dedicated resources to their review. These reviews were done alongside reviews for other products as well. By identifying and ensuring these first review to these applications, we believe that we can achieve the greatest public health impact most quickly. If FDA finds that a widely used, currently marketed product does not meet the standard in the law for marketing, the agency will not grant a marketing order and the product must be removed from the market. Conversely, if FDA finds that the widely used, currently marketed product does not meet the standard, or does meet, the standard for law for marketing, the agency will grant a marketing order and that product may remain on the market, subject to the conditions of that order. In either case, earlier review ensures a faster transition to the a marketplace of products that has been scientifically reviewed for their impact on public health.
Todd? Okay, next question. Does FDA see any opportunity for common data sharing amongst competitors, market data, literature review, etc., to cut time and costs from the process? Christy, I'll let you kick this one off.
Sure, and I want to echo one of the statements in Matt's earlier presentation regarding the use of a tobacco product master file. Applicants may share information without any release of trade secret or confidential commercial information through that process. I encourage everyone to look up TPMFs. We have a dedicated section on our website and discuss any open questions regarding that with their assigned regulatory health project manager. It's a quick and easy way to share information without handing over the keys to trade secret or commercial confidential info.
And I would just like to add that while FDA can't share industry submitters' proprietary data, there are opportunities for submitters to make data publicly available and to share and use already publicly available data. And there are some pretty good examples of data sharing that exist in HHS and FDA for public health initiatives.
Thank you both. Okay, next question. Are you still reviewing MRTP applications during this time period? And what queue are they in? Todd, can you take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we are still reviewing MRTPAs during this time period. We do have separate resources or groups of reviewers in the Office of Science that are dedicated to continued review of applications received for this program. There are relatively few of them relative to the huge number of applications received for the PMTA program and the large number for SC as well. So we are working through those. And that is something that we will continue to work through an ongoing process.
Thank you. Next question. Is a product's in-market history considered while reviewing applications, or is each product reviewed as a truly new product without consideration of its in-market history? Joanna, I'm going to give this one to you.
Sure. So yeah, to answer that question, a product's in-market history would potentially be considered when reviewing PMTAs that have been submitted to us. We use all available data when reviewing a pre-market application. So this may include real world data, or it could include also marketing trends based on a product's prior availability on the market. This information is important for FDA as it may help identify or inform concerns for use appeal or other factors that go into our APPH analysis.
What will happen if there are no ENDS products authorized by FDA by September 9th, 2021? I'm going to give this one back to you, Todd.
Thank you. Well, given the unprecedented number of applications, as well as other factors, the likelihood of FDA reviewing all of the applications received by September 9th is extremely low. Given that this would be an unprecedented number of applications and several orders of magnitude greater than anything the agency has experienced in the past. We will continue to allocate our resources with the goal of working as quickly as possible to transition the current marketplace for deemed products to one in which all products available for sale have undergone a careful science-based review by FDA. We will focus resources on products where scientific review will have the greatest public health impact based on their market share, while also committing to providing an opportunity for review during the one-year period to all companies regardless of size prior to the September 9th, 2021 deadline, at which time they risk FDA enforcement per FDA's guidance. FDA also has the discretion to defer enforcement action against a particular product on a case-by-case basis as the one-year period for that review comes to an end in September.
Thank you, Todd. Next question. What does FDA consider major and minor amendments for PMTA? Christy, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. So in short, a major amendment is going to be substantive, large amounts of data that FDA would have to review. So an example of this, similar to other FDA centers, could be the addition of a new clinical trial. It could be reanalysis of previously submitted data, significant amounts of manufacturing information or data not previously submitted. Minor amendments, in short, are anything outside of that. So it could be, let's just say that there was a change with some of the contacts, updates for some of the SOPs or other things such as that. Those would be considered minor. The important thing with a major amendment is when you look at it, this is something that would cause a large amount of time and FDA staff and resources to review. So in essence, it would reset our PMTA clocks when we're looking at that full review time frame. So it's really important when you're looking at the type of information that you're placing within your applications, they are complete upon submission, because submissions such as reanalysis of your data or a new clinical study could trigger a reset of that clock and time frame.
Thank you. Next question. How is the Office of Science managing the challenge of maintaining consistency across the tens of thousands of reviews conducted by hundreds of reviewers? Crystal, do you want to start us off on this one?
Sure. Matt covered this really well during his presentation, but FDA has expanded their review teams to prepare for the high volume of applications. Part of our preparation prior to kicking off review of the applications was to ensure that we had consistent process and consistent decision-making process and review of data. Part of that was a process whereby we paired staff working on the process with staff who were working on building IT systems and building new databases to ensure that we could consistently provide the same types of information to the reviewers during a consistent process, so that our reviewers were able to understand what was expected of them and to work a very consistent and efficient process.
I'm going to add a little bit as well to what Crystal started with. In addition, I want to note that during the preparation for our review teams, we have focused staff on particular application pathways and focused TPLs on that, in addition to some of the tools and training that we provided to them. So we have the same staff reviewing PMTAs from start to finish, and then separate staff reviewing SC reports, exemption requests, and so on. This also addresses consistent decision-making as we're looking through our portfolio.
And to add one last bit, one of the parts that Matt talked about is we've got a lot of scientists, but we've also got a lot of disciplines, and all of the disciplines are involved in all of the reviews of PMTAs. And so within those disciplines, we're actually asking each of those separate disciplines to meet regularly, and they're meeting something on the order of once a month and talking about what they're finding in their reviews, so that they can share their information and share the knowledge that's gained as they work their way through any problems that they've had, any issues that have come up, or any unknowns that they've crossed over, so that we have consistent knowledge for every review that comes up.
Yeah, and I guess I would add one other piece to it too, which is there are a small number of us that sign all of these final actions. So if you looked at all of the letters that we issue, you'll just see a couple names on it. And so we look at, for example, Todd and I look at every one of these actions, letters, and we make sure, that we do maintain that consistency across these programs. And so we do have a small group within the center that really looks at all these things from out the door for just that reason. And so I think the bottom line is you heard from the four of us chiming in the responses. We've done a lot. We believe consistency is a really important thing. We've put a lot of pieces in place ahead of the deadline and also are doing a lot of things now post deadline to make sure that we do our best to be as consistent as possible.
Okay, next question. How will the FDA consider the impact of flavors on youth initiation of products? Will any applications be denied for the inclusion of a flavor that is highly appealing to youth?
It's a really important question. I think FDA has made it clear that we are concerned about the impact of flavored products on youth tobacco initiation, including by prioritizing enforcement discretion or enforcement against flavored cartridge-based ends products, and also stated that the determination of whether a flavored ends product is appropriate for the protection of public health will be determined through our pre-market review process. Therefore, in its scientific review in PMTA, CTP considers the potential impact to youth of any new product, including the potential impact of flavors on youth initiation.
Next question. Since a random number generator was used to determine the order of review for the application submitted by September 9th, is there a way to determine where submissions are in the list? And will the assigned numbers be provided to applicants upon request? Christy, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So because the order of review of applications is or will be constantly evolving, so for example, due to we have large numbers of applications being withdrawn, refuse to accept or refuse to file decisions, providing that individual review number, that random number, wouldn't be particularly helpful or illustrative for companies, as it really wouldn't provide that greater context for what it means, what it may happen to those ahead of them in order in the queue. It's also an additional burden on FDA's resources during this period. Again, we've been focusing our resources on efficient review of applications rather than pulling other data to provide it out to applicants. So what we've done instead is we are communicating, when I say we, the assigned regulatory health project manager is communicating with the applicant. They provide a courtesy call to inform them when their application has been moved into that substantive review process. This is at the start of it, and it will typically give you a sense for when you may see a type of letter to come out of it. Again, if there's a question, you may reach out to your assigned RHPM to see the status. If you haven't had that call yet, they'll likely say it's still in queue.
All right, thank you. Next question. Given that review of many PMTAs have not yet begun, how will CTP prioritize any new PMTAs or supplemental PMTAs submitted in 2021 or before the backlog of September 9th, 2020 submission reviews have completed?
Yeah, another good question. And so let me just start by saying we have focused our resources on review of the applications that were submitted by September 9th of last year. We think in light of the court order and the ending of enforcement discretion, or at least broad enforcement discretion, it's important for us to complete the review of as many of those applications as possible. That being said, we have set some resources aside to work with some other things. So for example, Todd mentioned just a few minutes ago, he got a question, he fielded a question that we got about MRTPAs. Yes, we do have some resources, as Todd said, dedicated to working on evaluation of MRTPAs. It is greatly dwarfed, those resources devoted to MRTPA are greatly dwarfed compared to the resources devoted to applications received by last September 9th, but they are there. Similarly, supplemental PMTAs or new PMTAs, we do have some resources there. What we're doing again is trying to balance the need to be able to evaluate all the applications we get in, whether they came in by September 9th or not. Try to balance that against the fact that the courts have put this deadline for this September 9th in place. And so it really, for example, if we got a PMTN that identified a product that we thought may really mitigate youth access to ENDS products, we would likely pull that into review and review that. And so we do have some staff available to sort of do these assessments and to be able to review either new applications or supplemental applications as warranted. But again, I want to be really clear that the amount of progress or the degree of resources, the extent of resources we were committing to that is really small relative to the larger set of applications that are going to, or the larger set of products that are going to lose enforcement discretion this September if we don't in fact take final action.
All right. And in phase 2, as noted in the presentation, if CTP determines there is insufficient information to initiate scientific review, does CTP provide the applicant with the opportunity to update their application? Christy, do you want to address this?
Sure. So I think the main premise that I stated before is an application should be complete when submitted. When OS pulls for review, as of the date that we initiate that review, we pull the application and all amendments received as of that date. So if we haven't yet initiated review, either in phase 2 for filing, or if we are going to phase 3 for substantive review and an applicant has information to amend, submit it so it's been received before that start date. I want to note that once we have initiated review at that point, FDA is not obligated to review those amendments when considering information, and will issue an appropriate letter at that time. Our letters typically do state in the appendices what has and has not been considered for part of it. The other thing I want to note for letters, some in industry may not have a lot of experience with receipt of our letters. In addition, when you look at Appendix A, it will list every product related to that review. So for example, if an applicant has submitted 100,000 products, our review will list if it's for 100,000 products, or maybe we only reviewed 50,000, 100. So I just want you to pay attention to those appendices. And at the end of the day, if you still have clarifications or questions, your assigned regulatory health project manager, their information is listed in that letter. We have email addresses, phone numbers. Please reach out and contact them with clarifying questions.
Okay, this next one is for you, Todd. FDA has stated bridging may be appropriate, but has not further defined or provided examples that it would find suitable. Is bookmarking acceptable? For example, high and low wattage enough for devices, high and low nicotine strengths enough for e-liquids?
Okay, it's a broad question. And what I can say is it could be appropriate to identify like low extremes and high extremes. However, these extremes may be different depending upon the discipline that reviews your submission. So for example, if we're going to use this bracketing approach, it may be reasonable to provide a low and a high concentration of nicotine for one PG-VG combination to bridge the concentration of nicotine at this PG/VG ratio. However, there may be other factors to consider, such as if an applicant is using a salt form of nicotine, other PG/VG ratios, the types of bottles being used. So while the low extreme and high extreme may be reasonable, other considerations may also play with that and have to be result in additional testing needed to bridge the product lines between the two extremes. So ENDS design parameters and product characteristics, temperature of the heating element, voltage, wattage, control scheme, power duty cycle, and so forth, may affect aerosol characteristics, including particle size distribution and user exposure to nicotine and other HPHCs. If the ENDS product has different options for device settings, an applicant should consider providing testing for the range of the operating conditions, so various temperatures, wattage, voltage levels, as appropriate, and provide a scientific rationale for the choice of the settings that were used in their study, including how we should be using that information to interpret the results or to bridge the data to other settings. So we do think that using bridging to provide an easier way to provide us the data and allows us to review a lot less data is a great opportunity. However, we do want to make sure that we understand all of the implications that bridging brings to that table when you provide that information.
Okay, Christy, this one is for you. In the past, we have seen multiple rounds of deficiency questions for an application. For example, advice information requests, questions followed by preliminary findings questions, and even rounds of environmental questions. Given the current challenges facing CTP, how likely is this process and the number of rounds of question to change?
Okay. So I'm going to just be completely honest. In order to be most efficient with our review processes for the very large number of September 9th, 2020 applications received, FDA has streamlined the process for all review programs and has generally limited the application review to one deficiency letter. FDA will continue to issue environmental information request letters as appropriate. These letters, the environmental information requests, differ from our deficiency letters as those letters have already determined scientifically that the application is supported. So you would see an appropriate letter at the end. And I'm just going to note, if there are additional clarifications or anything in response to the deficiency letter, the RHPM will reach out to contact you for quick discussion. But I do want all applicants to be aware that in general, we are limiting review rounds to one deficiency letter.
Thank you. This kind of leads to our next question. I'm going to let Joanna answer it. What is the process for obtaining case-by-case extensions of the compliance period?
Okay. So FDA certainly understands the interest in this topic. And as we have stated in previous responses and during the presentation, we are striving to review and resolve as many applications as possible before September 9th, 2021. Broadly speaking, we note, as with all unauthorized products, generally, if a product has not received marketing authorization by the end of the one-year review period, the product risks FDA enforcement. Questions about enforcement plans and policy beyond the end of the compliance period are outside of the scope of this meeting and what FDA had planned to discuss today. But when we do have information to share, we will be sharing it publicly with all interested stakeholders.
All right, thank you. Next question, what percentage of applications were for flavored products? Crystal, do you want to take this one?
Sure. We don't currently track this data in a way that makes it easy for us to do that type of reporting and to give a precise number, but we can say that the majority of ENDS PMTAs are for flavored products.
Thank you. Many PMTAs submitted to FDA on or before September 9th, 2020 were without laboratory testing. Will these manufacturers receive deficiency letters?
I think
Go
I
ahead,
can
Todd.
take that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really depends. If an application is severely deficient, if it's missing great swaths of information that we need to be able to evaluate the product that is the subject of that PMTA, or is missing the product characterization, lack of testing, lack of scientific evidence, and so forth. There's a lot of things that can be missing and have been seen to be missing. The application may receive a denial in lieu of a deficiency letter. However, in cases where the tobacco product contains or it has the potential, well, if it's in cases where there's enough information for us to progress from the application through filing and into the scientific review, and we find that there is enough information for us to really start to dig into what is there. We are looking for testing in cases where there's a potential a tobacco product contains or has the potential to contain or to create HPHCs through reactions or degradation of the constituents. In those cases, we will expect there to be laboratory testing for each of the products or testing of the subset of products with a rationale for bridging, as I talked about earlier, the results from one product to another. Where this information is not available, the manufacturers are likely to receive a deficiency letter requesting that HPHC data.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, please explain the process for the continued review of provisional products and applications that were not associated with deemed product submissions, but were in scientific review at the time deemed product submissions were received. Deficiency letter responses for products that were already in Phase 3 substantive review before September 9th, 2020 appear to have been treated as new submissions and placed in queue with deemed product submissions submitted on or before September 9th, 2020. When will review of these deficiency letter responses commence? And Christy, you can take this one.
Figured that one was mine. So in short, and this was talked about in one of the slides that Matt presented, with the large number of applications moving into review at the same time, the novelty of reviewing over 6 million products, the finite nature of our review resources, and ensuring consistency, we really had to develop a process for the review order for all applications. As stated on our website with some of the recent updates and in Matt's presentation, all new applications and responses to deficiency letters were placed in with that randomized queue. And FDA will actually notify, as I stated earlier, the project manager will call when it's moved into the substantive review. This does include the provisional products that previously received a deficiency letter and they responded. They are included in there with part of that random number generated. Again, if an applicant is unsure, contact your assigned regulatory health project manager to verify if you've been moved into that Phase 3 substantive review or not. Your project manager can let you know if it is under review or if it's still in queue waiting to be reviewed. But we are treating, I want to note that they're not treated provisional responses to deficiency letters, whether it's provisional or for a regular product in the SC program, are not treated as new applications. They were just placed in and assigned random number generated, similar to our new applications.
Thank you. Are applications progressing through the review at the planned pace or more slowly due to the high number of applications? Matt, I'll let you address this.
Yeah, good question. Let me try to answer this in a couple ways, I guess. First, let me just say, we didn't know ahead of September 9th exactly how many applications we get, but we knew the number was going to be very, very large, much, much larger than we'd ever seen before. And of course, that has come true. So we did a lot of work ahead of September 9th. I highlighted just a few things in my presentation to get ready. I'll just share, another couple examples. I mean, we really put a lot of effort into training. As I said, we've hired so many new staff, both ahead of the bolus, during the bolus, in order to deal with this workload. And we put a lot of effort into training them and getting them up to speed. We also, in addition to streamlining our review process, really restructured it in some ways to really have folks more or less kind of specializing in different parts of the review process. All these things in an effort to, again, apply the same rigor that we always apply to our review, but to try to do it with, a higher level of throughput so that we could complete review as many of these applications received by last September 9th as possible by this September 9th. With all of that, we set pretty, I would say, pretty aggressive goals for ourselves on sort of the pace we could achieve during this 1 year period. And the reality is we are achieving it. These are, a very novel set of products with issues that we haven't really had to tackle before, the ways we're having to tackle them to complete our application review. And as I said, we're attacking this in terms of getting the work done in a very different way. But we are on pace, and by and large, there are some places where we may not be exactly where we want to be or where we thought we could be, but there are other places where we're well ahead of where we thought we would be. And, I think at the end, when we get to this September 9th and we look back, I think we will have achieved all that we expected to achieve by that date, and probably a little bit more than we expected to achieve at the pace we're going. I'm privileged to work with folks, colleagues that are super dedicated to their job, super motivated, and in spite of working in 100% virtual, in spite of having so many new staff come aboard, in spite of having such large workload of such novel applications, in spite of just a multitude of challenges, my colleagues both in and outside of OS are really working extremely hard and really, I think, will exceed our very ambitious goals by the September 9th.
I just want to throw in a follow-up question to something that Christy stated. For major amendments, what does a reset mean?
Oh, yeah. So essentially, we have within the statute a 180-day time frame for issuing a decision on a PMTA. So a major amendment essentially resets that 180-day clock. Typically, when we issue a deficiency letter, it would pause the clock. So say we issue it at day 90. When we receive the response, that would start at day 91 for us to pick up. If it's a major amendment, though, such as a reanalysis of previously submitted data, that would have been something needed for filing at the start. Therefore, we reset the clock for the full 180 days.
Thank you. Okay, next question. And I think Christy has already addressed this a little bit, but Crystal, I'll let you add to it. How do we know our applications have been received?
Yeah, so if an application was submitted electronically through the CTP portal, then there are a number of available ways to track the application. So for example, when it's received through the portal, there's a green check mark displayed, and there are also automated acknowledgements, and a user is able to enter the portal and view what they've submitted. This is one of the major benefits to using the portal to submit electronically to CTP, and we highly recommend that users use the portal to submit electronically to CTP. And I'll let Christy weigh in on this if she thinks it's necessary, but if an application was submitted in some other way using physical media like a hard drive or submitted in paper, then when an RHPM completes their acceptance review, they would place a call to the submitter and prepare a letter for either acceptance or a refuse to accept.
In short, and I think Crystal has it right, any application that comes in whether it's electronic or physical, receives a decision, and that's either going to be an acceptance letter or a refuse to accept letter. And I do want to kind of give an update. I know that we had numbers as of April 1st in the presentation, but let's just talk about the 3 pre-market pathways right now so folks have a sense. 100% of applications submitted under the exemption request pathway and under the substantial equivalence pathway have completed acceptance. If an applicant has not received a letter, either an acceptance or refuse to accept, I'm going to have them take a look at what was submitted with the date, make sure it was by September 9th, 2020, and contact the assigned regulatory health project manager. If they are not sure who that is, we also have the Ask CTP at fda.hhs.gov available where we can get you in touch with the right person. With respect to PMTAs, I can tell you that by the end of July, we expect to complete 100% acceptance for the millions of applications received through that pathway. We are through a significant percentage right now, but I do want to give folks a date so that they know if they haven't seen something for their PMTA by mid to late July, by the end of July, start of August, please start reaching out to your project manager because we will have 100% completion there.
Thank you. Okay, Joanna, the next question is for you. For PMTA submissions made after September 9th, 2021, does FDA plan to maintain an approach where only one deficiency letter is provided prior to making a decision on the application? Or will this process change where there will be an option for FDA to issue additional deficiency letters for a submission?
Okay, so Christy and Matt both touched on this a little bit. As part of our preparations for the influx of the large volume of PMTAs we received and other pre-market applications, we did streamline the review process to generally issue just one deficiency letter to promote efficiency. We are planning to reevaluate the effectiveness of this process change after the compliance period.
Thank you, Joanna. Okay, the next question is for Todd, and it's a very long one, so I can break it up in pieces if you need me to. We are a very small operation and undertaking a study to gather health risk data in comparison to products in the same category, which would mean other e-liquids for open take systems, as well as products in different categories, such as cigarettes. It's simply not financially nor logistically feasible in the response period allotted in the deficiency letter. Understandably, large companies have the means to conduct their own analysis of products on the market, conduct varying market research, and chemical analysis of the competing products. We do not have such an operation. We only focus on small volume manufacture of e-liquids only for open take vaporizers. Therefore, questions are, given internal confidential data of various companies, how does the FDA suggest we obtain sufficient detailed information on health risk data and other user data of other tobacco products to compare? That's just the first question, Todd. Do you want me to?
Todd, you're muted.
I should never mute myself. All right. So why don't we go ahead and do all of the questions here, and then we'll see if we can talk about them in a larger context rather than trying to piecemeal.
Sure. The next one is likewise, how can we collect chemistry data or health data of products like ours, existing e-liquids, if other similar products are also currently in the PMTA process as well, and such data is not available publicly? And then the next part is, can articles or general information we can find on public sources, essentially web-based sources, be sufficient for comparison to our PMTA products? And does the comparison need to be specific to flavors or more broadly to the category of e-liquids?
Okay, there's a lot going on here. Let me try and at least address a lot of these questions. So while evaluating a new tobacco product to determine whether it's appropriate for protection of public health, we do not consider the size of the company. We just have to make a determination as to whether or not the product itself is appropriate for the protection of public health, whether it's large or small. The same goes with the time to respond. As stated earlier, we have a relatively short time frame, 90-day time frame to respond to queries for information that's missing or that we need to be able to evaluate more fully the information that has been submitted. That if we had an extended period of time or were to extend that longer, there'd be no way we could evaluate the products within the time frame set out by the court. So we have to maintain these short time frames. It gives us the best opportunity to review the most products that are available. So as we take a look at this, it is each applicant's responsibility to support a scientific finding for authorization. The standard does not change based upon the company's size or needs. As to the specific questions posed, it is the responsibility of the applicant to pull together the data, the studies, literature, and findings necessary to demonstrate that the tobacco product is appropriate for the protection of public health. These studies and literature may be peer-reviewed journals. They may be studies conducted by the applicant. They may be studies conducted by a third-party laboratory at the request of the applicant. Where the studies are conducted using tobacco products that are not the subject of the application, the applicant may want to consider relating how the study relates to their products with appropriate scientific justification. As to data concerning comparator products for ENDS, we realize there are no ENDS products that have received marketing orders, and therefore you're free to compare your product to any other product with adequate justification as to why you chose the comparator and the knowledge about how it responds under the same testing or study conditions that you were reporting for your product. One of the things that a application is intended to do is an opportunity for you to tell the story of your product, why you think it's appropriate for the protection of public health with the data to support your statements. And if you need to find ways of getting testing done, it is your responsibility to find a way to get us the information we need to help us make the decision as to whether or not that product does protect public health or may protect public health. Don't know I can answer all the questions, but perhaps.
We may get a couple follow-ups, but that's okay.
Fair enough.
I think this question has already been addressed in a few other questions, but I'll ask it anyways. And Christy, if you want to add anything to it that you didn't get in the other questions, but this question says, how does FDA balance prioritize those reviews with reviews of PMTAs submitted after September 9th? And how long can they expect to receive an acceptance letter and potentially enter into substantive review?
Sure. So I do think the presentations, some of the updates on our website for the progress on our deemed applications, as well as previous answers, touched on all of those questions. In short, we are following our defined process with our randomization for our review programs for the order in which we're reviewing. With respect to acceptance, as I stated earlier, we have completed phase 1 acceptance for 100% of the exemption requests and SC reports submitted by September 9th, 2020. We are complete with a significant number of PMTA applications that were submitted, and we expect 100% completion by mid to late July of this year. Any questions regarding status? If an application was received, again, reach out to your assigned regulatory health project manager. And if you don't know who they are, please utilize askctp at fda.hhs.gov so that we can get you in touch with the correct person.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, what is the time period used to determine the number of applications submitted by the September 9th deadline? Crystal, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So after looking at the submission of all applications, we've found that the majority of the applications for deemed new tobacco products on the market as of August 8th, 2016, were submitted to the agency within the 5-month period before the application deadline of September 9th, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's be very specific here. So that basically means that 5 period goes from approximately April of 2020 to that very specific time on September 9th. So for that reason, we're using that time frame to estimate the numbers of applications submitted and received by the deadline for our metrics and reporting. And it's important to note, as Matt mentioned earlier, that these are estimates and that we estimate them to be accurate to within 10%, so approximately 90% accurate. But keep in mind that at any given time, because of the flux and the way that the process works, those numbers are generally mostly accurate, but may not be 100% completely accurate.
As FDA continues its review of PMTAs submitted by September 9th, how will it balance prioritize those reviews? I feel like we've answered this already.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me jump on this
Yes.
here because I tried to touch upon this earlier, which it is a balancing act, and we are prioritizing the applications received by September 9th of last year, but we are using some of our resources, a small percentage, but some resources to address MRTPA's applications they received after September 9th of last year. Full applications as well as supplemental applications. So again, I mean, I think you're hearing a similar theme from all of us, which is we recognize the loss of enforcement discretion come this September 9th. And in light of that, we are focusing on, the majority of our resources and efforts on completing as many reviews as possible. Doesn't guarantee there'll be positive orders necessarily, but we think it's important that we at least finish a review, even if some of them are going to result in negative marketing orders.
Okay, next question I'll give to Joanna. Will any applications be denied for high concentrations of nicotine?
In short, no. I mean, so there is currently no product standards in place that can be applied to e-liquid categories broadly. So this means that all information that's submitted in support of your PMTA is considered in totality, and we consider everything on a case-by-case basis, based on the product, in making our APPH determination.
All right, next question. What happens to applications that were submitted by the deadline but have not been notified of their application status or accepted due to the backlog of PMTAs? I feel like Christy has already addressed this, but Todd, do you have anything to add?
Todd, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Muted.
What I get, I should know you. Anyway, I would say Christy answered it very well. I'm not sure that I can add anything other than to reiterate that the PMTAs, in general, by mid-July, all the applications submitted by mid-September or September 9th will be notified if they have been accepted or not. And if they have not received that notice, that they should contact the RHPM for status. And if you don't know who your RHPM is, you should contact the Ask CTP at fda.hhs.gov for a response.
Thank you, Todd. Next question. Christy, this one's for you. FDA is known for issuing deficiency letters that request additional data, test results within a 90-day response period. Companies are not always able to respond within that period due to the limitations on capacity of labs and other service providers. What is FDA doing to address this in situations where applicants are otherwise willing to comply in good faith with FDA's request for additional data?
Okay, so we do understand applications were submitted without lab testing, with the original application sent September 9th, 2020. But as I stated earlier, we also expected applicants to continue to have complete applications. And if they didn't have that testing in there, they were to continue testing and amend it with results once received. Because I noted that when we go to initiate a review process, we would pull the original application and all amendments received as of that date. If an applicant receives a deficiency letter and they're unable to respond within the 90 days outlined in that letter for a PMTA, it's important that they still respond with what they have and then also give us a detailed plan with a timeline for all remaining data. Broadly speaking, I'm going to note that as with all unauthorized products generally, if that product hasn't received marketing authorization by the end of the 1-year review period due to lack of data, it does risk FDA enforcement. So in short, work with due diligence for completion of lab testing, amend where possible, and we can discuss certain cases with the project manager when we're looking at that application.
Thank you, Christy. Next question. For the applied millions of ENDS products, how could CTP deal with such huge burdens and push forward the PMTA process still in time? Matt? Oh,
No,
I thought you were muted.
no, Todd seems to be the only one of us that can't figure out the unmute button.
Someday I'll get there.
I have no problem being unmuted. It's being muted that really is a struggle for me. Yeah, I'm not sure I exactly understand the question. You know, how do we push forward the PMTA process still in time? And so I'm going to try to answer as best I can, and it's going to repeat, I think, a lot of things you guys have already heard, which is we know, I mean, that we're not going to be able to review all 6+ million of these applications by this September 9th. We will review way more, we'll complete the review of way more applications than we've ever done in our history within this 1-year period. For sure, we will get a lot done. We have done a lot of work ahead of time. We're doing a lot of, things now, even making adjustments along the way to make sure that we can review as many of these as possible, by this September 9th. But, we are not going to get through all 6 million, and that's for sure. And that's why we came up with what we believe is a very fair triage prioritization process that also is really geared towards having the most significant public health impact that we can in light of what the court has ordered. And so, I don't really have anything new to add in response to this that we already haven't said. But again, I reiterate that we are not only on track, I think, to achieve what we had hoped to achieve by this September 9th. I think we're going to actually have achieved some things that we didn't necessarily think we would be able to do by the September 9th, in part because of going to hire and train some more people. And as I said earlier, really a lot of folks across the center that are really dedicated and motivated to try to complete as many reviews as possible by the September 9th.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, next question. Can an application use general HPHC testing from other countries? Todd, this one's yours.
Okie doke. Well, I think that we need to break this question down a little bit. When we talk about general HPHC testing, I presume that the individual who sent the question in is indicating that they want to take a look at data that's either been published in literature or that is available on the internet somewhere. And whether that data comes from, in this case, happens to come from a different country. So the question that I think they're asking is, can I bridge my product with that other material that's been tested out there? And so absolutely, it is possible to bridge from your product to other products, regardless of where those products were tested. And this can work for HPHC testing from other comparable product types. Now, all data for HPHCs, including data from other countries, should be collected using test methods that are suitable for purpose, adequately validated, and conducted using an accredited testing laboratory. And those are the sorts of things we'll be looking for when we take a look at the data that's presented. Now, the applicant may want to include this sort of documentation in their information in their application. So if you are using general HPHC testing that is descriptive of all of the HPHCs collected for all of the ENDS devices out there and want to compare your product to it, it is certainly one way to do it. And if you're going to go that route, you need to provide data showing why your product lives within this greater context. And those decisions are sometimes more difficult than those that are compared one-to-one to another product. So it is, again, your opportunity to tell the story. That's your opportunity to use the data that you have at hand to demonstrate that your product is appropriate for the protection of public health.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, next question. Christy, this one is for you. Can FDA provide more specific thresholds for acceptance filing and scientific review? As acceptance letters are received, it appears as if statutory PMTA requirements are not the standard unless there is no EA. Industry is aware of several consortium PMTA templates and specific applications that fail to include a compliant ingredient list, a number identify only the complex ingredients, and a description of the manufacturing and controls. Section 910B1B and C require the information and the applications are non-compliant. Why are they not immediately rejected? The number of applications to review would be drastically reduced.
Okay. So when we talk about a PMTA, I just want to note acceptance is going to be determined by jurisdiction. So basically, is it a regulated tobacco product? And under 21 CFR, it's 1105. And that's that final RTA rule, which includes items such as is the application in English or translated to English? Does it contain product identifying information? Does it contain an EA, and so on? And to date, I haven't seen any issues around acceptance for that. So I will ask if there is an issue or we've seen it, that an example is provided to us in OS. You can send it to myself, you can send it to your assigned regulatory health project manager, and we'll look into that. With respect to filing, when answering questions such as around ingredient lists, I want to remind folks that some manufacturers don't have access to complex ingredients, so they may rely on tobacco product master files. And as Matt gave a breakdown of the large number of TPMFs we have, those complex ingredients are considered trade secret information, so it may be reasonable for filing purposes to call it out by the name that it's purchased under or that particular number. Therefore, that substantive review phase, when we go into phase 3, is going to tackle some of the more finite details for the breakdowns for the complex ingredients. But I kind of want to note we are still hitting the requirements in 910B1B for those ingredient lists when we have the full list. We're just also trying to be very careful about protection of information as required. And the same holds true for manufacturing. We do have tobacco product master files that describe manufacturing controls and processes in detail through a master file. Therefore, we would take some of the broad statements for filing under the PMTA and look under the tobacco product master file for that and really dig into it during substantive review. But I will state lack of those items would be a basis for RTF. So let's say that you've submitted a closed ends where you neglected to provide any details on your e-liquid in that closed system. If we do not see details such as PGVG or nicotine concentrations or things such as that, while you may have a complex flavor ingredient or something else, but we're missing those items, that would be a basis for an RTF. Same thing like for your manufacturing. If you have 5 different facilities performed for your different stages of manufacturing, and let's say 3 of them you've completely forgotten or misplaced and they're not in the application, that may result in a basis for an RTF as well. I hope that's a little bit more helpful with where we're coming from and also respecting confidentiality of data.
Thanks, Christy. The next question, if there is no long-term health data about how a product will impact public health, would that product receive a deficiency letter? Matt, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think in that scenario, we'd likely send a deficiency letter. I mean, I think once we get into substantive scientific review, as we've said a couple times this afternoon, our intent is to issue a single deficiency letter. And as I explained with the new language we put in, the PMTA deficiency letters specifically, the intent of those letters is to identify information that we think is necessary to complete our review and make our final determination whether to issue a marketing grant or marketing denying order. So if there is missing information like no long-term health data about the product, we would likely put a deficiency, likely send a deficiency letter, and that would certainly be one of the deficiencies. I will reiterate what I believe Todd and maybe even Christy talked about, which is such data can be public data. It can be public data that so I guess just to clarify, if there was no data specific to that, none of this long-term data specific to the product that is subject to the application, that wouldn't necessarily result in a deficiency, because if they did actually give us some public data and the application clearly explained how that data is applicable to the product subject to the application, if we agree with that, we wouldn't actually send a deficiency. Now, if they submitted some general public health sort of long-term data and they didn't link it to didn't adequately link it to their product, then again that would result in deficiency.
Okay, next question is for Crystal. CTP's website has frequent updates. Is there a good way to know when those changes are made?
There are a couple of different ways to tell when a website's changed. All of our websites have content current as of dates on them up at the top right corner. You can also always sign up for email updates from CTP, which would give you notifications whenever CTP has something they'd like to share with you. For instance, there are multiple types of email outreach that describe things like regulation updates, guidances, enforcement actions, compliance-related announcements, etc. And CTP is also on social media. So for instance, you can follow CTP on Twitter at FDA Tobacco. And if you have any specific questions about content on the websites, you can always email the eSubmissions help desk or the Ask CTP email address.
Thank you. Okay, we have a follow-up for Todd on controls and standards. The question is, we manufacture ENDS devices. How do we know what controls and standards to test vapor output against when there are no known standard e-liquids?
Well, you are asking a fundamental issue having to do with all of tobacco products. The numbers of standards that are available to us are fairly limited. And it is something that we would love to see change over time, whether that is an ISO change or whether it's a CORESA change, whether there are other standards that are developed. All of those would be tremendously helpful. However, none of that is the case at the moment. And so what we recommend is that, again, you tell your story. Choose the standard product that you think is appropriate. Explain to us why you say that standard is the appropriate for material to use, and then go ahead and do your testing. And if we disagree with your use of that material, will include a deficiency requesting more information and provide more guidance as to what information would be necessary for us to consider it. However, it really does come down to what it is you think you need to do to provide information about your product so that we can make that determination.
Okay, thanks, Todd. I have another question for you. And some of this you may have already touched on, but what are the stability testing requirements at a minimum for a PMTA? Stating a variety is not always helpful. What time points are required? Is liquid and aerosol testing needed at all time points for e-liquid manufacturers? Do device manufacturers need to test devices at a later time point to understand how device functions with older liquids, other liquids, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think older liquids makes sense. So the choice of which endpoints to track and the number of time points to collect are the responsibility of the applicant. It's going to depend upon the type of shelf life you're using for your product. And it's going to look at what are the critical modes of failure for your given product. So in the case of a e-liquid, because I think that's most of the questions here have to do with e-liquid, we're looking for and are concerned with a number of things, including microbial growth and physical degradation over the shelf life of the tobacco product. So those are the sorts of things we're going to be looking for. Now, whether how often you test that and what are the specific time points are immaterial. You do the ones that you think are appropriate. You provide as many as you need to demonstrate that there is a trend or there's not a trend in the either microbial growth or the growth of TSNAs caused by microbial growth or other signal events that are going to give us an understanding of the stability of the materials. And that should be provided in that application. So now, if you have not completed your full study at the time of submission, so back in September when you submitted, you only finished 6 months of your intended 2-year study, we would recommend that you go ahead and include that additional information as it comes available through amendments, and until such time as you've completed your full study. Going more to the question, another question is, should we be looking at aerosol testing of old e-liquids that have been sitting on the shelf for 2, 3, 4 years? That will depend upon those critical modes of failure. And if you believe that there is a potential for failure of an e-liquid, that it's going to see degradation that may result in a change to the constituents that a user is exposed to, then you should provide that information to us. If that is not the case, then that information may not be necessary. But it all depends upon your product, which you should know better than anybody else.
Thanks, Todd. Next question. Will deferred enforcement past September 9th, 2021 happen for all applicants or only on a case-by-case basis? And will the FDA need to petition Judge Grimm's court to extend that time? Joanna, I'm going to give this one to you.
Yep, I'll take this one. And this one, we kind of touched on this in a couple of other responses. So similar to what we had said earlier, we definitely understand the interest in this topic, and we're not planning to discuss it as outside of the scope of this meeting. But FDA does have the discretion to defer enforcement action against a particular product on a case-by-case basis after the 1-year period for review comes to an end this coming September. But broadly speaking, it's important to remind everyone, if products are not authorized by September 9th of 2021 and do not come off the market at that time, they risk FDA enforcement.
In recent deficiency letters received, CTP has stated, to maximize review efficiency, we do not intend to issue additional deficiency letters for these applications. If we respond to the first deficiency letter with our best attempt, but CTP has follow-up questions, will CTP issue an NSE or no market order letter, or will we have a way to respond to any follow-up questions? Christy, can you take this?
Yes, so I touched on this earlier. To maximize our review efficiency, we intend to make a decision based on the response to the deficiency letter. In short, we're looking to issue only one deficiency letter. If there are additional clarifications, FDA will contact you. You'll hear from your regulatory health project manager. Our goal is to issue a decision via order after we review that first response. But there is a small opportunity, if there are clarifications, for FDA to reach out and discuss.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, how long is the process of checking the content likely to take? When can the first approvals be expected? Are there already positive results? Thank you very much for your effort. Matt, I'm going to let you take this.
Yeah, why don't I jump in, because I did touch on this towards the end of my presentation. For SC and EX, we have already issued hundreds of order letters. As of April 1st, it was nearly 300. That number is even higher today. The vast majority of those letters under the EX and SC programs have been positive order letters, although there have been some negative as well. For the PMTA program, as I stated, we have not yet issued any final orders, but we do anticipate issuing orders by this September 9th. I don't know, when we'll issue, it's hard for me to predict when we'll issue our first order letters. I know this asks about approvals. I'm just going to say more broadly order letters, which could be positive or negative. It's hard for me to say when we'll issue those under the PMTA program. Again, these are really novel products with a lot of scientific and policy and regulatory issues that we're grappling with. But, we are on track to be able to issue, orders by September 9th. I just don't know, again, how far ahead of September 9th you'll see our first order letters under the PMTA program.
And I just want to jump in with one bit of terminology. Matt probably knows I'm going to say this. Our center, we do not approve products. We do not approve tobacco products. There is no safe tobacco product. And actually stating it's an approved tobacco product is a violation where you could have enforcement action. So our orders, we either authorize, so you would receive a marketing order where it's authorizing, or we deny. We do not approve, though, in CTP.
All right, next question. What is the status of the PMTA and SC final rules? Joanna.
I'll take this one. As many of you are probably already aware, on January of this year, the PMTA and SC rules were displayed in the Federal Register, but did not publish. And subsequently the next day, a memo from the White House ordered the withdrawal of any rules that did not publish in the Federal Register by noon that day. So these rules have been withdrawn, but FDA is working closely with the new administration to advance regulations and policies that were withdrawn and would be in line with the agency's public health mission. So stay tuned for more. You monitor our website, of course, and everybody will be made aware when that happens.
Okay, next question. What would be the approach for product improvement modifications in design or process during the PMTA scientific review process? Christy, you want to address this?
Sure. So I want folks to remember what the definition of a new tobacco product is in 910. Any modification to a product renders it new. Any new product is going to be required to be authorized through one of our 3 pre-market pathways. Therefore, when we're looking at applications, each application is specific to that product. If an applicant is proposing to modify a product, then they will need to submit the application. And the one thing that I want to note, there is a little bit of confusion over this. If you've previously received authorization via PMTA, one quick route to modify a product is to submit what we call a supplemental PMTA, where you're referencing that original PMTA. But I want to note a supplement can only be sent in once that product has been authorized. It cannot be sent in prior to that because FDA has not rendered a decision authorizing it. This is different than an amendment, which you've heard us talk about earlier. An amendment is where you're sending additional information to a pending application or decision. So you could amend either your original application or you could even amend a supplement later. Therefore, when you're looking at modifications, I do recommend some discussions with your assigned regulatory health project manager. We have 3 pre-market pathways. There may be options that you haven't considered. So we may want to look at a supplement for a PMTA. You may want to look at an option for an exemption request, depending on if it's a minor modification of a tobacco additive, or we may want to look at the SE pathway if you've received authorization through there. I know this question is specific to PMTAs, but I just want to do a reminder when we're talking about all 3 programs and let you know that your RHPM is a great resource for it, and a general reminder that a supplement is only when the PMTA has been authorized.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more minutes for a few more questions. Will the FDA weigh tobacco industry sponsored versus academic research similarly while reviewing the public health standard and PMTAs? Todd?
I will try to be brief. The FDA considers all available evidence in reviewing PMTAs. If the research and the data were derived from an appropriately designed study and that is fit for purpose, data is considered consistently across all sources.
Okay, thank you. Let's get one more in. When our product was added to the product list, did that provide us an extra year of enforcement discretion? Christy, you want to take this one?
Yep. In short, the answer is no. So if the application was submitted by September 9th, 2020, FDA generally intends to continue to defer enforcement discretion for 1 year. So that's to September 9th, 2021. I want to note that the product list is one source of information to know the applications for the particular products that were submitted, but I want to note that that is not the only source of information. To be added to the product list, there were several criteria that needed to be established, and I want to note that there may be some applications submitted where we do not have products listed on our product list due to an applicant not responding to FDA when there are questions about the marketing status of their particular product, or lack of a timely response to the specific question that was asked. So retailers, if you're out there, I encourage you to talk to manufacturers to see what your options are if a product can continue to be sold and can take advantage of that 1 year enforcement discretion. But in short, the enforcement discretion period is from September 9th, 2020 to September 9th, 2021, unless during that time period that particular product has received a negative decision from FDA, such as a refuse to accept, refuse to file, or a denial such as found not exempt, NSE, or the marketing denial order.
Okay, thanks, Christy. I don't think we have much time for any other questions, but if you all have additional questions, or if your question did not get answered, please reach out to the CTP by using the appropriate email address, which will be listed on the screen after the meeting. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. We thank you for all of your questions and hope we are able to provide you with more information on deemed product review. Again, the presentation slides along with the recording of the meeting will be posted to CTP's website in the coming weeks. We also want to encourage you to access access the helpful resources CTP has available on its website for additional information on submitting tobacco product applications, updates on the review progress, and other helpful guidance. So we just want to thank you guys again. And Matt, do you want to say the last word?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple things. One, thank you to everyone who attended this. We had a really good turnout. I hope you found the information, some of the information here very useful to you. And want to especially thank those who took the time to submit questions. I don't know what the total tally is, but I know we received hundreds of questions both before and during the meeting. And really appreciate you guys taking the time to submit those to us so that we could try to do our best to provide useful information to everyone. But really, lastly, I want to thank all the folks on the screen right now for being willing to join me here and try to answer some really challenging but really important questions that we're receiving from stakeholders. Really appreciate all the work you guys are doing both before and during the meeting to make this successful. And then I also want to thank, there's a lot of folks both inside and outside the Office of Science that you're not seeing on video right now that have been instrumental ahead of the meeting and during it and making this successful. So just want to thank all of my colleagues within CTP for their work to pull this off, and really just want to point out to everyone that as came out over and over again during this meeting, we all have a lot of work within CTP ahead of us, still on our plates, and all the folks you see on screen, all the folks behind the scenes that you're not seeing, have all put in the extra effort to make this meeting a possibility without losing pace, because we got some little inkling that people are worried about how many reviews we can get through by the September 9th. And we are able to pull off this meeting because so many of my colleagues are willing to put in that extra effort without losing pace on the work we're doing by September 9th, so that we could spend this time this afternoon trying to help stakeholders understand where we're at and clarify a lot of issues that you guys might have. So with that, just thanks to everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.